I'm about to tell you about a crime that was so horrific that the perpetrator was the first Australian lady to get a life sentence without parole. Katherine Mary Knight was convicted for the murder of her partner John Price in February 2000. She's currently in prison and will never be released. Hello cruel world, my name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. So Katherine stabbed John Price to death, then she skinned him, put his skin on meat hooks, then she cooked his head and parts of his body with the intention of feeding this to his children, but she was thankfully stopped by police. So to use the formal vernacular of forensic psychiatry, this case is totally cray-cray fam. It was actually sent to me by a psychiatry registrar named Steve Alley from Australia. Shout out to you, Steve. Thanks for the suggestion. By the way, as a general point, people often get in contact and they ask me to do a case, send suggestions. Apologies if I've not got back to you or if I haven't put the video up yet. It's nothing personal. I'm just a very busy man. I'm very busy gambling away my kids' inheritance on online poker. So, what were Katherine Knight's horrific background details? What was her psychiatric diagnosis? And how did this contribute to her violence? Can she be treated or rehabilitated? Does a human head taste like chicken? Would Katherine Knight be suitable for the not guilty by reason of insanity defence? I will answer all these questions and much, much more in this episode of A Psych For Sore Minds. Sit back, grab your Bisto gravy granules and enjoy this episode. So firstly, what was Katherine Knight's horrific background? Katherine was raised in a dysfunctional family environment, more heartbreak and trauma than a well-developed Marvel villain. Her mother, Barbara, had been married to a man named Jack in New South Wales, and they had 4 sons before she started an adulterous relationship with a man called Ken Knight, who was a friend and a co-worker of her husband Jack, and that man eventually became Katherine's father. So everybody knew about this affair in their small town, and it caused a massive scandal. The couple, Barbara and Ken, who by the way are not to be mistaken from Barbie and Ken, your favourite toys that you play with every single night after your mum's gone to sleep. They moved to another place in New South Wales. 2 older sons stayed with their father, Jack, and then the 2 younger sons were sent to be raised by an aunt in Sydney. And then Barbara had 4 additional children with Ken, including 2 twin girls born in 1955, one of them who would become our eventual murderer and terrible cook, Katherine Knight. So Knight's father was an alcoholic who openly used violence and intimidation and would rape his wife Barbara up to 10 times a day. By the way, if you're interested, I've done a video on somebody called Valérie Bacot, who's a French woman who killed her husband in France in 2016 after suffering years of abuse. In that video, I expand on the battered woman syndrome, which was used or can be used as a defense. Go chickadee check my video. So sexuality was certainly a very open book within this family. Katherine's mother would openly talk about how much she hated sex, how much she hated men. On one occasion, Katherine told her mum that one of her boyfriends wanted to do something sexual, but she wasn't keen, and Barbara told her, put up with it and stop complaining. That's pretty harsh. She's not the greatest role model, let's face it. Katherine claimed she was sexually assaulted by several members of her family from being a young girl at the age of 11, though apparently there are some holes within that story. Katherine was close to her uncle Oscar, who committed suicide in 1969, and she said over the years that his ghost visits her, even up to current times. Is this experience psychotic? Not necessarily. People often find comfort in paranormal explanations or phenomena. It's not necessarily related to mental illness. It could just be that you're a bit weird. Or maybe not. You let me know, viewers. Have you ever had phenomenal experiences to do with the paranormal? If so, let me know in the comments. When she arrived at high school, Katherine was a loner, and according to her classmates, she was a bully who would beat up smaller children. She injured at least one boy with a weapon. Although oddly, when she wasn't in a rage, Katherine was apparently a model student with great behaviour. However, she left the school at 15 without being able to read or write, and she worked in a clothing factory. A year later, Katherine started cutting up offal at the local abattoir, and she was quickly promoted to boning and was given her own butcher's knife. Now, a lesser psychiatrist might be tempted to make puns here about bonings and abattoirs, but that would be offal. High five.
No.
No? At home, Katherine hung knives over her bed everywhere that she lived in case she needed them. Now, I'm not a relationship counsellor, but if your betrothed hangs knives over your bed and they're not a samurai, I think you might have a problem. Katherine had a number of violent relationships. This included being married to a man named David 𝐘𝐻𝐻, who was a heavy drinker. They married a year after meeting in 1973, and the couple actually arrived on their wedding on a motorcycle. Classy. And apparently, as soon as they arrived, Katherine's mother, Barbara, took 𝐘𝐻𝐻 aside and gave him some advice. And to quote 𝐘𝐻𝐻,
"The old girl said to me, watch out, you better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you.
Start up the wrong way and do the wrong thing and you're fucked.
Don't ever think of playing on her.
She'll fucking kill you." And that was her mother talking.
She told me she's got something loose. She's got a screw loose somewhere.
Now, I'm not a relationship counsellor, but if the mother of your newfound star-kissed lover is warning you that she might kill you, I think you might have a problem. So on their wedding night, Katherine Knight apparently tried to strangle 𝐘𝐻𝐻 because he only had intercourse with her 3 times and then he fell asleep. Now, I'm not a relationship counsellor, but yeah, you get the point. Wow, 3 times. I have to admit, that makes my wedding night, which was 10 years ago, seem kind of tame. You know, I almost got to second base though. High five.
No.
No. This marriage was particularly violent, including a heavily pregnant Katherine once burning 𝐘𝐻𝐻's clothes and shoes before him, and then she hit him on the back of the head with a frying pan. And all of this happened because 𝐘𝐻𝐻 arrived home late from a darts competition. Then in 1976, shortly after the birth of their first child, apparently unable to cope with the abuse, 𝐘𝐻𝐻 left Katherine for another woman. The next day, Knight apparently was diagnosed with postnatal depression. Okay, so dear viewers, what is postnatal depression? I'll give you a very quick breakdown. It happens to about 1 in every 10 women within a year of giving birth. So it's very typical for women to feel a bit down, a bit low, a bit tearful, a bit anxious within the first week of giving birth. This is often called the baby blues, and it is very common. It's considered, normal, typical. In fact, I think your mother had it, although to be fair, you were an exceptionally ugly baby. So the baby blues typically last less than 2 weeks after a woman gives birth. But if it lingers longer, then that is postnatal depression. And also if it's more severe. So that's associated with a persistent feeling of sadness and low mood and a lack of enjoyment and a loss of interest and just basically the woman withdrawing. Also, the woman might feel a lack of energy and feel tired all the time, and they might have difficulty bonding with the baby. And in terms of a psychiatric risk assessment, which would be part of my job, you're always looking for frightening thoughts, for example, about the woman hurting the baby. By the way, just in case you're interested, I've got a video series, I think it's a couple of videos, on a lady called 𝐸𝐭 𝐸𝐧𝐝. It's a tragic case. She became completely psychotic, so not postnatal depression, but postpartum psychosis after birth in 2001, and she ended up drowning and killing her 5 children. Tragic case, but really fascinating. Go check out my video if that interests you at all. You Bombay! So Katherine was admitted to hospital, and after being released, she apparently placed her 2-month-old baby on a railway line shortly before a train was due. Yikes, that is not a good look. And after that, she stole an axe and went into town, threatening to kill several people. And a vagrant found and rescued the baby, apparently only minutes before the train came. A few days after that, Knight slashed the face of a woman with one of her knives and demanded that this woman drive her to where 𝐘𝐻𝐻 was because she wanted to find him. but the woman escaped at a service station, and then Katherine Knight took another young boy hostage and was threatening him with a knife. She was disarmed when the police arrived and they started attacking her with brooms, and then she was admitted to a psychiatric unit. I have to say, for me, there's a big contrast between all of this lethal violence, yet, let's face it, kind of slapstick kind of going on with brooms and frying pans. I'm half expecting Katherine to drop a massive anvil on somebody at some point. Katherine was released in August 1976 from hospital, so she was there for about 3 months altogether, which to me, as a forensic psychiatrist, is an exceptionally and possibly dangerously short admission. So either she must have been deemed not criminally responsible, which I think is unlikely, but it's possible, in which case she should have had long-term rehabilitation, especially considering the risk profiles, or she was deemed to be criminally responsible. And then there should have been some legal consequences, in my view. I mean, these are serious offences. Leaving a baby on a train line, slashing a woman across the face, kidnapping a young boy. This is serious stuff. Katherine Knight also had another couple of relationships. I'm not going to go into it all because this is starting to feel like an episode of the Jeremy Kyle show. For our American viewers, that's the UK equivalent of Jerry Springer. By the way, if you're interested in knowing who are my favourite and least favourite Jeremys, please check out my video on polygraphs. As well as that, I discuss how polygraphs work and how to beat one if you, dear viewers, are ever facing a murder charge. But I will summarise Katherine Knight's relationship by saying that they were gruesomely abusive. Knight had caused some serious injuries to her partners, including hitting another one with a frying pan and stabbing a man with a pair of scissors. And she was actually in a relationship with another man when she had an affair with the eventual victim, John Price, who was the father of 3 when Knight met him and was in his 40s. Okay, so what happened within the relationship of John Price and Knight? What led up to the brutal killing and the decapitation? Before I tell you that, let me introduce you to this channel. You're watching a Psych For Sore Minds. My name is Dr. 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders in prisons and in courts and in psychiatric units. I also work as an expert witness, giving evidence in criminal trials. I am your favourite London-based Asian British forensic psychiatrist, or at least in your top 5. This channel dissects a whole range of issues, like a smorgasbord of entertainment and education, from individual diagnoses to high-profile cases, to talking about my own personal cases, anonymised, to talking about criminality, to talking about diagnosis. What I'm trying to say is there's something for everybody on this channel. I implore you to subscribe. Not only does it help me out immensely, but it prevents all traffic lights turning red all the way for you driving to work, guaranteed, or your money back. Okay, back to the case. Unsurprisingly, given her history, the relationship between Price and Knight was turbulent, to say the least. They would often fight, and some of this was about Price refusing to marry Knight, and at times Price kicked Knight out of the house. In 2000, there was a series of assaults leading up to the killing, with Knight stabbing Price. And Price finally kicked Katherine out of the house. And on leap year day, which is the 29th of February 2000, he took out a restraining order in an attempt to keep him and his children away from Katherine. And that afternoon, he told his co-workers, if I do not come back into work the next day, it would be because Knight had murdered him. And his colleagues feared for his life, and they begged him not to go home. I order you not to go. I order you. I know now why you cry, but it is something I can never do. Now, I'm not a relationship counsellor, but if your co-workers are scared that you might be killed that very day by your femme, then she might be a little bit too fatale. So when he got home, Price realised that Katherine had sent his children away for a sleepover at a friend's house, and he spent the evening with his neighbours before returning about 11 p.m. to bed. And then Knight came into the house after Price had gone to sleep. She woke up Price and they had sex, and then they fell asleep, which to me just kind of goes to show that when it comes to anatomy-based decisions, for most men, the head is not mightier than the sword. The next morning, Neighbours were concerned that Price's car was still in the driveway and he hadn't gone to work like usual. So they knocked on his window to wake him up and they noticed blood on the front door. Then they alerted the police. The police broke down the door and they found Price's dead body. The victim, Price, was 44 years old at the time. Knight was comatose from taking a number of pills. She'd stabbed Price with a butcher's knife as he was sleeping. And according to the crime scene analysis, Knight had chased him through the house and he managed to open the front door and get outside, but then he was dragged back whilst he was bleeding and he was stabbed at least 37 times in the front and the back of his body. Right, it's about to get gruesome. Several hours later, Knight had skinned him, hung the skin on meat hooks in the lounge, and then decapitated Price and cooked part of his body. She served up his body with baked potato, pumpkin, beetroot, zucchini, cabbage, and yellow gravy. So this has to be one of the most grisly crimes that I've ever heard about. Though to be fair, a good range of vegetables. And then she placed this food on the dining table in plates along with notes on each place with the names of Price's grown-up children on it, Jonathan and Beck. So it seemed that she was attempting to serve body parts to his children, and then when the police came, Price's head was found in a pot of vegetables. By the way, for you English country gents, zucchini is what an American would call a courgette or what a vegan would call a delicacy. Katherine Knight apparently had no memory of the crime. She had a trial in July 2001 and she tried to get away with manslaughter, although this was rejected. Knight's legal team tried to use the defences of dissociation and amnesia. The meaning of dissociation is like a mental process of disconnecting from one's thoughts, from one's feelings, from one's memory, or even their sense of identity. And the meaning of amnesia is... No, sorry, it's gone. So this claim was supported by most of the psychiatrists, although they still considered her sane. So just to very quickly summarise the insanity plea, you can see more about it on the video that I did as a collab with a black belt barrister, link below. But very briefly, not guilty by reason of insanity is where the perpetrator had a defect of reason caused by a disease of the mind. So either they didn't know what they were doing at all, or if they did, they didn't know that it was wrong. So for example, in another set of circumstances, had Knight been psychotic, I don't think she was, but had she been, if she genuinely thought that Price was a massive zucchini and she was slicing him rather than, killing him, that might have got the insanity defense. Or if she felt that she had to cook him to save the lives of other people or save the world, then that would be something similar. If you're interested in that defense, I've talked about it in my video on 𝐸𝐭 Yates, and I've also talked about it in my video of Nicola Edgington. Go check them out on my channel, both fascinating cases. I delve into the psychology and the legal terminology behind it. By the way, if you're interested in other real-life true crimes that involve cannibalism, firstly, you might need therapy. Secondly, check out my video on Peter Bryan, the Broadmoor cannibal who killed 3 people. The first was a young shop assistant. The second was his own friend called Brian Cherry, and he ate Brian Cherry's brain. And the third killing occurred in Broadmoor. Right, back to our case. Knight has continued to deny responsibility for her actions, and she's shown no remorse. And this contributed to her sentence of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole, which means she will never be released. And as I said right at the top of this video, she's the first woman in Australian history that's ever achieved this. So congratulations, I guess. She did try to appeal in 2006, but appeal was denied. So why did she do it? Well, in the note that she left along with the plates, she said she was trying to get revenge on Jonathan, who's Price's son, for raping her daughter. But this was perceived by the judge to be untrue, but it seemed to be true in her mind, so possibly she was even delusional. So let's get into the psychology of it all. What was Katherine Knight's diagnosis? She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So
Pay attention, kids, because I'm about to educate your simple brains.
I'm going to go through the features of borderline personality disorder, but unlike other channels, I'm actually going to match them with Knight's behaviour and presentation. Let's go through some of them. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Absolutely. She was going from relationship to relationship, including having affairs and relationships overlapping. She was out looking for 𝐘𝐻𝐻 and also the victim Price, even after those men had left her. So there's a tick for that. Next feature, unstable and chaotic interpersonal relationships. Defo, multiple violence, threatening, argumentative relationships. Next one, marked, disturbed sense of identity and distorted self-image. Gotta be honest with you, I don't have enough information to confirm or refute this either way, so nothing for that one. Impulsive or reckless behaviour. Affirmative, Captain. This included placing her own baby on a railway track. That could have ended horrifically. Next one, recurrent suicidal gestures of self-harm. Not as far as I know, to be fair. Next feature, intense or uncontrollable emotional reactions. Zinger! She loses her shit monumentally, I think is fair to say. Inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling her anger. Ditto. Chronic feelings of emptiness. I presume that Knight had these because she was constantly jumping between relationships. Transient, stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. You goddamn right. In the note that she left, she said that she wanted to get revenge on Price's son for raping her daughter. But this, as I said before, is untrue as far as we know. So it suggests that she was paranoid. Okay, I just want to very quickly tell you the difference between a mental illness and a personality disorder. So a mental illness tends to be like a temporary break from reality, like psychosis, typically hearing voices or having delusions such as paranoid delusions. Whereas a personality disorder is more entrenched. It's like flaws in somebody's characteristics. Just quickly want to say, I've previously made videos on personality disorders, and let's just say there was a very mixed reception. So just to be crystal clear, I'm only telling you what the definition of a personality disorder is. Do not shoot the messenger, and definitely don't decapitate him and cook his head with zucchinis. I think there is a feeling of disappointment and discourse because some people with personality disorders feel that it's unfair to label people with personality disorders. And I have to say, I agree with this to a degree for some people in some circumstances. So I sympathise with that. I'm just telling you what it is. I'm not telling you that it's necessarily a helpful or valid diagnosis. In fact, I've made a video on this exact kind of controversy about label personality disorders. Go chickadee, check it out. Interestingly, 2 of the 3 consultant psychiatrists at Katherine Knight's trial believed that her chances for cure were, and I quote, nil. I think it's a moot point, to be honest with you, because she's going to be in prison for the rest of her life. So is there much point in trying to address her personality disorder? I suppose you could argue that it could help in terms of her interaction with other inmates. I have to say, borderline personality disorder is fairly common in the patient group that I see, and it's mostly non-intentional offending. It's to do with explosive reactions, non-criminogenic people, as opposed to something like antisocial personality disorder, which is lifelong career criminality. So can borderline personality disorder be treated? The brief answer is yes, but it needs a degree of motivation and engagement from the patients themselves. Psychotherapy is the primary treatment for borderline personality disorder. Medications can be used to treat comorbid disorders such as depression or anxiety, and you can have short-term hospitalization for crisis treatments, although there's an argument that actually makes the patient dependent on hospitalization and doesn't help in the long term. The main type of therapy for borderline personality disorder is dialectical behavioral therapy, and I'm going to tell you very briefly what that is. It addresses 4 different areas. The first is emotional regulation. So the patient learns to recognize firstly and then control certain emotions, such as anger, being intensely frustrated, being depressed, or being anxious. The next part is mindfulness, which is like a meditative exercise where you pay attention non-judgmentally to the present moment and you engage all your emotions and all your senses fully. In the words of the great Bruce Lee, don't think, feel. Then there's distress tolerance. So that's accepting and finding meaning for and tolerating distressful events. and circumstances, whatever those might be. There might be relationship problems, loss of a job, serious illness, or people watching your YouTube videos but not having the courtesy to subscribe to your channel. Sorry. And then there's interpersonal effectiveness, which is treating others with care, interest, validation, and respect. Okay, it's time to get things wrapped up. To conclude, I've told you about this horrific case of Katherine Knight. I've talked about her horrible traumatic background. I've talked about her diagnosis and now how this might have contributed to her violence in offending. Just to be very clear, the vast majority of people with borderline personality disorder do not commit serious violence. Most can lead productive lives. They tend to be very passionate, often creative, often fun to be around. I've also put you off zucchinis for life. I've talked about the treatment of borderline personality disorder and also the very specific medico-legal aspects of this case. Anything else? Have I forgotten anything? What's that? Yeah, that's a horrible thing to say and terrible language. Sorry, I don't know what that dude's problem was. Oh yeah, my book. So I've got a book coming out in March 2022. I think there's links to buy it on pre-order. It's a bit like this channel, but a lot more detailed, a lot more autobiographical. It'll be about how I became a forensic psychiatrist, my training, and of course, lots of my real life fascinating cases that I have themed. You should go cop it, it's gonna be dope. I would love if you spread the love and got other people to subscribe to this channel. I'm a weak man, I need validation, I need love. I'm very fickle and very shallow, so if you can help me with that, then I would very much appreciate it. That's all I have to say, apart from stay euthymic, and whatever you do, do not forget, under any circumstances, I love you.